Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive. Tonight's story is titled, The Night Gardener. Let the shadows speak. Part 1. The Flowers That Shouldn't Bloom. When I moved into the little house on Granger Hollow Road, I wasn't searching for a fresh start. I was looking for an end. After my mother died, the city had grown teeth. Every alley whispered threats. Every stranger's gaze lingered too long. I packed 2 bags, left the lease unpaid, and drove until the building shrank and the air felt less judgmental. Granger Hollow was the kind of town where people still waved at passing cars, but never stepped off their porches to say hello. They watched, always watched. The house I rented was old but solid. Blue paint peeled from the shutters, and ivy clung to its wooden bones like it was trying to keep it from leaving. The backyard stretched out into a wall of black trees, thick and towering, a forest untouched since before the town had a name. It was the kind of place where things grew, even things that shouldn't. I noticed it the first night, red flowers blooming beneath my window. Dozens of them, crimson, symmetrical, unlike anything I'd ever seen. They hadn't been there that morning. I told myself it was just nerves. Moving is stressful. Grief is disorienting. But still, those flowers, they were too perfect. They glowed under the moonlight like they were meant to be seen. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear, not really. It was more like anticipation, as if something had paused mid-breath just outside the house. The next day, I met a man named Caleb. He knocked around 10 a.m., carrying a tray of cookies that looked suspiciously store-bought. He was tall, lean, with a librarian smile and the kind of voice you trust before you realize you shouldn't. "I live across the street," he said. "Figured I'd say hello before the Hollow gets to you." I smiled politely. "The Hollow?" He nodded toward the tree line behind my house. "They say it watches back." I laughed. He didn't. That evening, when I opened the back door to let some air in, the flowers had tripled. Not just at the window now. They ran in a circle around the entire house, like a boundary or a cage. I bent to touch one. It twitched, not in the wind. In response, I didn't sleep that night either. Part 2. A Voice Beneath the Floorboards. On the third day, I heard the voice. It came from beneath the floorboards of the living room. Soft, low, as if someone were humming through water. At first, I thought it might be pipes or the old furnace kicking in, but the noise wasn't mechanical. It had rhythm. Sad, slow rhythm. I knelt beside the warped boards and pressed my ear to the wood. "He doesn't belong here," it whispered. "Be careful who you let in." I jerked back, pulse thundering in my ears. My first thought was, "You're finally cracking." It took 3 days, but I knew what I'd heard. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a warning. Later that day, I visited the local bookstore. Not for answers. I needed to pretend to be normal, to touch the world that still had coffee, receipts, and paperback books that smelled like damp basements. The store's owner, Ms. Wexler, was in her 60s, short, with a voice that smoked more than she ever had. She stared at me too long when I told her where I'd moved. "Granger Hollow Road," she repeated slowly. "Near the woods." "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual. "Cute little place. Red flowers in the yard." Her expression tightened. She stepped around the counter and handed me a book without a word. It was a faded volume titled Flora of the Forgotten South. I flipped through the pages. Page 47. There they were. My flowers. Bloodvale. Rare. Uncatalogued. Not native. Said to grow only where something watches at night. Bloom in response to fear. Thrive on silence. There was a scribbled note beneath it. If they circle your home, you are no longer alone. That night, the red flowers reached the porch. I locked the door. Not because I thought they'd come in, that would be insane, but because something behind them might. Something that had been there longer than the town itself. And yet, I wasn't scared. There was a strange comfort in the rhythm of their presence. Every night, they crept a little closer, as if measuring me. Testing. Watching. Then Caleb came again. This time, no cookies. No smile. "Mind if I come in?" He asked without really asking. Before I could answer, he was already stepping over the threshold. Something in the air shifted the moment he crossed, like warm water turning ice cold. "I thought I'd check on you," he said, glancing toward the back window. "You've had visitors." He said it too casually, like he knew, like he expected it. We talked for a while, about the town, the neighbors, my job, which didn't exist. I worked remotely. But mostly, he talked about the Hollow. "They say the woods take care of their own," he said, tapping his fingers on the armrest of my chair. "If it likes you, you're safe." He leaned in. "But if it doesn't?" He smiled. It wasn't friendly. After he left, I walked the perimeter of the yard with a flashlight. The flowers had stopped growing. They weren't dead, just holding position, waiting. Back inside, I sat in silence. The house creaked. The trees swayed. I listened to the floor. Nothing. Then, from beneath the boards, "Do not trust the man with no shadow." Part 3. The Man with No Shadow. I didn't sleep after the voice spoke. Not because I was afraid, because I realized I'd seen it. That morning, sunlight spilled across the living room floor, and I stood in the very spot where Caleb had lingered the night before. I remembered him moving across the room, leaning close, casting no outline against the floorboards, no dark impression beneath the light. He had no shadow. I tried to explain it away. Maybe the angle was off. Maybe my mind had filled in the blank. But that small, impossible detail had rooted itself in my head like a splinter. The flowers hadn't moved since he visited. They were waiting for something. So was I. I needed to know more. I went back to Ms. Wexler's bookstore. She was sitting behind the counter again, surrounded by incense smoke and unread mail. "Have you ever heard of a man with no shadow?" I asked bluntly. Her hand froze mid-air, holding a cup of tea. Slowly, she lowered it and looked at me like I'd spoken a curse. "You need to be careful what doors you knock on, child." I didn't reply. After a pause, she slid open a drawer and pulled out an old manila folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, Polaroids, and 2 sketches. Crude charcoal drawings of a tall man standing in a field of blood-red blooms. No eyes, no shadow. "They called him a quiet man," she said, voice low. "Always appears when the Hollow chooses someone. He's not from here, not even from there." She nodded toward the woods. "He just shows up when someone gets close to something they shouldn't touch." I looked at the sketch again. The man in the picture wore a crooked smile. It looked eerily like Caleb's. That night, the flowers began to wither. Not from lack of water. It was like they'd been burned from within. Black veins spread through their petals, and the air around them turned sour, like copper and rot. Inside the house, the boards no longer whispered. They creaked and groaned, as if straining to hold something beneath. The voice didn't come. Instead, something else did. At 3:13 a.m., I woke to a tapping on the window. Not knocking. Tapping, soft, methodical like fingernails against glass. I rose slowly, my feet cold on the floor. The curtains were already parted. There was nothing there. No figure. No eyes. Just a reflection of the backyard. And a single red flower blooming in the dirt where they'd all died. As I stared, the petals slowly peeled open. Not like a flower, but like a mouth. From it came a breath. And then a voice. "He's inside." I turned too fast. My neck popped. The house was silent still. But I knew. It wasn't warning me about the garden. I wasn't alone anymore. I grabbed the old fire poker from the hearth and moved carefully through the hall, past the kitchen, down the short corridor toward my bedroom. My hand trembled as I reached for the knob. It was already open. Inside, nothing moved. The windows were shut. The lamp was still on, but the bed covers were disturbed. And at the foot of the mattress, written in something dark, was a word smeared across the blanket. "Belong." I backed away. Something in the air shifted again. That same cold inversion I'd felt the first night Caleb stepped over the threshold. From beneath the bed came a soft, slow scrape. Fingernails on wood, followed by a breath. "You called me." A voice rasped, and I came. Part 4. The whisper in the wood. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat on the couch with every light on and the poker clenched so tightly in my hands, I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. The smudged word still lingered on my blanket like dried rust. Belong. I tried to tell myself it meant nothing, that it was just some sick prank, but I knew better. The hollow had started whispering again. At dawn, I walked to the edge of the forest. The tree line looked like the mouth of a cave. Too dark for morning, too still for life. No birds, no wind, just the hush of 1,000 branches holding their breath. I didn't step inside. I only watched. Then I heard it. Not a voice this time, but a sound, like stone grinding against stone. Slow, rhythmic. It came from below the forest, as if something was moving beneath the roots. Then it stopped. A breeze pushed through the trees suddenly, and with it, the scent of iron and wet bark, and beneath it, something else. Something ancient. Familiar. That afternoon, Caleb returned. He didn't knock. He stood in the yard, with a circle of dead flowers had rotted away. The look on his face wasn't a smile this time. It was calm, almost gentle. I told you, he said, his voice lower than I remembered. The hollow takes care of its own. I stood on the porch, gripping the railing. What are you? He tilted his head. You already know. I shook mine. You're not just a man. No, he said plainly. Neither are you. Not anymore. That stopped me cold. Caleb took a step closer, and for a moment, I saw it. Not a shadow, but a flicker. Something underneath his skin, like smoke trapped in glass. Moving, shifting, watching. You heard it, didn't you? He whispered. The voice beneath your floor. The flowers. The tapping at the glass. It chose you. I didn't ask for this, I said, my voice cracking. No one ever does, he replied. But it doesn't matter. You've been marked. He gestured toward the trees. It will call again soon. And this time it won't wait outside. That night I dreamed in static. I stood in the middle of the forest, barefoot on soft moss that bled when I stepped. All around me were mirrors, hanging from trees, buried halfway in soil, nailed into trunks. In each reflection, I was not myself. Some were thinner, some older, some had red eyes, some had none. One version of me, the tallest, the stillest, stare without blinking. You're not safe with him, he said. He's not here to protect you. He's here to replace you. I woke up screaming. At 2:46 a.m., the phone rang. I hadn't used the landline since moving in. I hadn't even given out the number. I let it ring 3 times before answering. No voice, just breathing. Then, come to the trees. Come now, or he'll take everything. The line went dead. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, barefoot, still shaking. Then I saw it. On the counter, where the phone had been, a flower. Fresh, red, alive. It hadn't been there a moment ago. Its petals were wet with blood. Part 5. Beneath the Roots. I didn't wait until morning. The forest had called. Not with words, but with something deeper. Something that pressed behind my ribs like a second heartbeat. I put on boots, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped into the trees. The night swallowed me whole. At first, there were paths, narrow dirt veins winding between the trees. But as I walked deeper, the trails disappeared. My feet sank into moss, then mulch, then something that felt too soft to be earth. Branches reached down instead of up. Bark peeled like burnt skin. The trees were too quiet. No insects, no wind, just a constant, low thrum under my feet, like the forest was breathing. After maybe 20 minutes, or maybe an hour, time wasn't working properly, I found a clearing. It was round, perfectly so. In its center was a mound of stone, covered in red vines and strange markings I didn't recognize. Not runes, not letters, more like wounds etched into stone. My flashlight flickered. The moment its beam hit the stones, I heard a sound, a deep, gravelly inhale from below. Then the mound shifted. It wasn't a mound at all. It was a ribcage. I stumbled back. My light sputtered and died. The clearing filled with a warm red glow, not from above, but from the ground itself. The soil shimmered, revealing veins of pulsing scarlet light threading through the roots like arteries. And then a voice spoke, not from the air, but from inside my skull. You should not be alone here, but he has made you so. We offered you warning. We offered you bloom. But still, you let him in. I fell to my knees. I didn't know. I whispered. I didn't understand. The voice darkened. Then now, you must see. The world tilted. The clearing blurred. When I blinked again, I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was back in my house, but not my version of it. The furniture was wrong. The walls were cracked. There was something buried in the floor. A shadow moved through the hallway. It had Caleb's frame, but not his movement. It was too smooth, like a video on fast forward, yet every motion deliberate. I watched as he entered a room, my room, and sat on the edge of the bed. A second later, the door opened behind him. It was me, but not me. This version of me looked older, worn, eyes sunken and skin pale. There were bruises on the arms, bandages on the throat. Caleb stood. The two versions stared at each other. Then the other me spoke. Why did you come back? Caleb smiled, and everything shattered. I gasped awake on the forest floor, soaked in sweat and dirt. The ribcage stones were still there, still pulsing. The vines had receded, revealing the full message carved across their bones. He takes their shapes. He wears their names. He eats what they forget. I stumbled back through the woods, every branch now bending toward me, every leaf whispering one word. Run, run, run. I didn't stop until I saw the light of my porch. But the moment I stepped into my yard, I saw him. Caleb, sitting calmly on the steps, as if he'd been waiting all night. You went in, he said quietly. I didn't answer. You saw what they wanted you to see. He stood slowly, brushing dirt from his pants. But you still don't understand, do you? His eyes glinted. They lie too, you know. All gods do. Then he smiled again, that same thin, crooked smile. The same one from the sketches in Wexler's folder. And for the first time I realized he hadn't aged a day in any of them. Part 6. The face beneath the skin. I didn't speak. Not to Caleb. Not to the voice beneath the floor. Not even to myself. That night, I sat on the porch and watched the moon bleed through the branches. The red flower was gone. In its place was a hole. Not dug. Not torn. A natural wound in the earth. Circular, black, and breathing. I should have been terrified, but I wasn't, because something inside me had started to remember. The next morning, I went back to the bookstore. Ms. Wexler looked up as I entered, but didn't speak. She already knew why I was there. I saw it. I told her. Her hands trembled as she unlocked the drawer again. This time, she pulled out a second folder. This one marked Pattern Dissolutions. Inside were photos. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Faces blurred. Names blacked out. Houses overgrown with the same red flowers. All of them listed with the same note beneath. Subject vanished. Property sealed. One survivor. Always one. At the bottom of the stack, I found something else. A photo of me. Younger. Maybe 8 years old. Standing beside my mother in front of a small cabin that looked familiar. My mother's eyes were circled in red ink. Her name scribbled beneath. Islam Madsen. Marked. Taken. My hand shook. What is this? Ms. Wexler finally spoke. Her voice was a whisper. You've been here before. I left without another word. Back home, I tore through every drawer, every box, every memory I thought was mine. I found the truth in a shoebox beneath the bed. A journal, weather-worn, pages torn, written in a hand that was not mine, and yet unmistakably familiar. Caleb came again today. He always does when the voices get louder. The man in the mirror is getting closer. He wears my skin better than I do. The flowers listen, but they don't speak. Not unless I bleed. And then, near the end, I'm not the first to live in this skin, and I won't be the last. I dropped the journal, because now I remembered. Not all of it. Not clearly, but like old film flickering in the back of my brain. The first time I saw Caleb, I was 7. My mother screamed. The flowers bloomed, and something pulled me into the hollow. That night, I didn't sleep. I let the house stay dark. No lights, no fire, just me and the cold. At 3 a.m., the whisper returned beneath the floorboards. He will wear your face, as he did the others. But you were not empty, were you? And then came a second voice. Not from below, but from within me. No, he never left me enough room. I fell to the ground, convulsing. Something opened inside me. A pressure, like a scream held behind glass for too long. My skin burned. My chest ached. I saw myself in the reflection of the window. But it wasn't me. My eyes were black. My veins glowed red. Something moved beneath the surface of my cheek, like fingers tracing from the inside. And then the voice, the one that had always been there, silent until now, finally spoke with clarity. You are the last route, the final gate. He cannot pass unless you break. I understood then. The hollow had never just protected me. It had planted something in me. A seed, a sentinel, and now it was awakening. Outside, the wind howled. The trees bent. Caleb stood at the edge of the yard, watching, smiling. No eyes, no shadow. He raised one hand, not to wave, but to command. And I felt it, something in my chest pulling, bending, stretching toward him. But then the floor cracked. From the board below, red vines erupted, twisting, flowering, screaming. They wrapped around me, not to harm, but to hold, to anchor. Do not let him in. Do not forget who you were before he named you. I screamed as the air turned to ash. And for a moment, just a moment, I saw it. The true face of Caleb. Not human, not even beast, just hunger, shaped like a man. Part 7. The Skinwalker's Name. I ran. Through the house, through the yard, across the half-dead grass, and into the trees. The vines had released me, but their touch still lingered, warm like a memory. Behind me, I could hear the boards screaming, the walls cracking. Caleb was no longer pretending. He was coming, but the forest had changed. It wasn't just dark, it was aware. The trees bent toward me, their trunks forming arches. The ground glowed faintly beneath my feet, pulsing with each step I took. I wasn't just being guided, I was being claimed. Somewhere deep in the hollow, I stopped. There was a clearing, not the one from before. This one was older, wilder. The stones here weren't carved. They had grown from the earth like teeth. In the center stood a single figure. Not Caleb, not me. Something else. Tall, rooted, cloaked in rotted bark and moss. Its face was blank, no eyes, no mouth. Only grooves where names should have been. I fell to my knees. You were the gardener, I whispered. The figure tilted its head. Then it spoke, not in voice, but in feeling. Like remembering a dream you never lived. He wore your father. He wore your mother. But he could not wear you. I shook. Why not? Because your name was hidden. The world shifted. Suddenly I was back in that memory. The cabin, my mother, my child's self. Caleb's face outside the window. My mother screaming, chanting something in a language I didn't know. And then she looked at me, eyes full of fire and grief. Close your ears, she said. Forget your name. Let it be buried. And she whispered it. My true name, the one I had forgotten, the one he could never find. Back in the clearing, the gardener reached toward me. Its hand split into vines, then roots, then flame. It touched my forehead, and I remembered everything. How I had been chosen, not because I was weak, but because I was seeded. The hollow had placed something in me generations ago. My bloodline was a lock, a vessel. And Caleb? He was never just Caleb. He was a skinwalker, an echo spirit, a name eater. He took names from the mouths of the dying, wore them like masks, and hunted the next. But he could not wear a soul without a name. I opened my eyes. The hollow around me was burning red. The vines hissed. The trees bent. Caleb stood at the edge of the clearing now, his body flickering, half smoke, half shadow. His face shifted between forms. My mother, my childhood self, Ms. Wexler, strangers I'd never seen. Then he spoke, and a dozen voices came out. You've remembered. That's not fair. You don't get to be whole. You were broken first. I stood, fire in my veins. "You don't belong here." He laughed. "Neither do you." Then he lunged. Time cracked. He was inside me. Not physically, but psychically, metaphysically, violently. Clawing through my thoughts, rifling through dreams, looking for any remaining fractures. Where is it? Where's the hole I can fit inside? But the hollow was awake now, and I was no longer just myself. From inside me, the voice returned, no longer whispering. It roared, "You will not plant your name here." Caleb screamed. The forest howled, and then the clearing exploded in light. When I woke, I was alone. The stones were still there. The gardener was gone. But around the edge of the clearing, red flowers bloomed again, brighter, taller, reaching toward the sky. And in the center where Caleb had stood, there was only ash. No bones, no blood, no shadow, just silence. I walked back home. Each step felt lighter and heavier. I was not who I had been. I didn't yet know who I had become. But I knew this. The hollow remembered my name now, and so did I. Part 8. The Last Bloom. The days that followed felt like someone else's life. I slept, but not deeply. Ate, but without taste. The world had softened around the edges, like it knew not to press too hard, afraid it might shatter me. But the hollow had not forgotten. The flowers still bloomed each night, circling the house. They no longer glowed with fear. Now, they pulsed gently with something stranger. Recognition. One morning, I found a letter on my doorstep. No stamp, no name, no handwriting, just a folded page inside, yellowed with age, smelling faintly of wet bark. There were only 3 words. "You are ready." That night, the floorboards shifted again, not in fear, not in warning. An invitation. I pulled up the old planks in the living room. Beneath them was not dirt, not insulation, but roots. Red, alive, moving slowly like veins beneath skin, and in the center, the door. Small, round, etched with a spiral of vines. It opened with a breath. The tunnel was narrow at first, damp. The air smelled like copper and candle wax. But it grew wider as I descended. Walls lined with carvings. Faces without eyes, trees without leaves, names with lines scratched through them. I passed bones, books, mirrors turned inward. And finally, I reached a cavern. Circular, carved in stone. At its center stood a chair made of wood and iron, rooted into the ground like a throne grown, not built. And standing beside it was her, my mother, not as I remembered her, tired, worried, brittle, but tall, radiant still. Her skin shimmered with the same red glow as the flowers. Her voice was both hers and not. "You remembered." I nodded. My throat burned, but I said it anyway. "What now?" She stepped aside and gestured to the chair. "You sit. You stay. You keep the circle unbroken." Or she looked back toward the tunnel behind me. "You leave. And forget again. But the hollow will not." I looked at the chair. It was simple, heavy, ancient. It was a position, not just a seat. A responsibility. A boundary. The gardener wasn't a person. It was a role. A watcher. A warden. Whoever sat there kept the balance. Ensured that things like Caleb stay buried, that memories stay guarded, that names were never stolen without price. I looked back one last time. If I walked back through the tunnel, back into the world, I could reclaim something of a life. Move again, forget again, pretend again. But deep down I knew there would always be another Caleb, another seed, another name, unless someone tended the roots. So I sat. The chair accepted me. Roots curled around my ankles, my wrists. They weren't binding me. They were grounding me. And then the walls breathed. 1,000 whispers swelled into song. The hollow knew me now, and I knew it. If you ever walk too far into the woods near Granger Hollow and find yourself among flowers that bloom out of season, stop. Listen. If you hear your name spoken from the trees, not shouted, not called, just spoken, walk the other way. Because it remembers now. And so do I.
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.